Great. Awesome. Let's get started. I am so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much, Luki, for being on my show, which is called The Secrets of Greatness. Let me give all of you guys a very fantastic introduction of Luki. He's a wonderful human being, very helpful. And, just a quick background about him and I. We connected through a mutual friend a couple of months ago, and there was an instant connection because a lot of our goals were very similar and very aligned. And it's really exciting for me that today, Luki, you agreed to do this show with me, and this is our first collaboration in a way you can say it, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So to tell you guys a little bit more about Luki, Luki is Toronto's youth career coach, and his goal is to make Toronto the mentorship capital of the world. One of his other goals is to elevate education through soft skills and to positively impact 1 billion people. That is a phenomenal goal. Luki is actually a former management consultant and a campus recruiting lead with a background in computer science. He also is an author of a book called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, which is a book that I will highly recommend to you guys. He's also an educator and a startup advisor. Oh my God, that's like you're wearing so many different hats, Luki. That must be really that must be overwhelming or exciting. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on your show. And even though it's called Secrets of Greatness, I kind of wonder like why I've been invited here. So I don't think any of that as more than just some things that I've done. And obviously some people have these perceptions of kind of greatness and grandeur, but a little bit is just kind of a incremental step-by-step type of activities that have gone and improved and hopefully get better and better over time, and hopefully just the start of a whole bunch of other things that will get even better as we go through this. So I'm excited to be on and share some insights and hopefully the stuff I wish I knew earlier with other folks that are listening in. And yeah, so happy to be on. Thanks so much, Omar, for having me.
Oh, no, you do point out as something very interesting and something I truly believe in, and this is something I impart on the students that and young professionals that I work with. That getting to that top level, like however way each person defines greatness or success, right? It's always an iterative process, as you said. It's like baby steps, right? And I
Mhm.
think one of the key reasons you asked me, like, why you're here. I think to me, you're a fantastic person to gain those insights because you too have done your research and your studies, and you have so much of a plethora of experience, wealth of experience that you can share with the world, with the young professionals that they can utilize and pick on those insights and implement it in their lives to make those gradual baby steps, as you said, right? So that's the whole purpose behind this entire series.
Yeah,
So,
well, thanks for having me on.
uh, most welcome, my friend. Okay, so first question to you is on decision making, making difficult decisions.
Mhm.
This is something that a lot of us, especially the younger generation, everyone in whatever aspect of life and whatever phase of their life they're in, everyone at some point of their life will be faced with some sort of like a dilemma, or they will be required to make difficult decisions. And I think couple of years ago, you had to make a very difficult decision. You had spent almost 13 years working at Deloitte, climbing up the corporate ladder at
Mhm.
the prestigious management consulting firm, and you were basically one step away from becoming partner,
Mhm.
right? Which is in other words, that's for those of you who do not know what does a partner mean. It's almost like a C-level executive at the company, and you're so close to that level, and then you suddenly decide to leave and take a risk by becoming a career coach. So that must have been a very difficult decision, I'm sure. So
Mhm.
can you walk us through, Luki, your mental decision making process and break down that process for us?
Yeah, so it was definitely a difficult decision. I still keep in touch with the folks at Deloitte, and my former partner reminds me that if you stayed here, you would have been a partner by now. I'm like, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. But anyway, so and you mentioned that the decision was sudden, and in all honesty, was anything but, right. If you talk to my wife, it was probably years in the making, where
I see.
it actually took a long time, and I hemmed and hawed and flipped and flopped so many times. Probably was in the span of like a year or two, right? So essentially, what happened was, again, I got into those personal development books,
Mm-hmm.
and really what hit it was I was traveling a lot as a
Okay.
consultant. Plane Monday morning, back on Thursday, and I would be in the evenings FaceTiming with my wife, and my kids were growing up over a screen, right? So they were learning to walk and talk. Second one on the way, and I was like, oh, well, that's not the type of dad that I want to be.
Yeah.
So I had conversations with folks to say, okay, like, what are the options? So the firm was great. They wanted to keep me local, put me on like bank initiatives, because if you work with one of the banks, then you tend to be around downtown Toronto. Um, but I knew just in the sector that I was, the one that I was an expert at, there was going to be travel. So we had a whole bunch of discussions in terms of moving me into more a people focused role, because they saw like the coaching, or I kind of let them know that I love this kind of coaching and mentoring type work, the campus recruiting stuff. Could I play more of a role there? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, although I like that, I don't know if I'd want to do that full time. Could I do an internal role where we're going to help with their professional development
Right.
process? Yeah, there are certain parts of it that I didn't align with, so
Yeah.
I said no. There's also the human capital consulting part of it, which they said I could switch to, but it's like being at kind of the senior manager level, and not really having done any of that work previously, it would be really difficult to switch there. So um, we went through a whole process, and yeah, so we tried to find a fit, and then eventually I said, you know what, I was always entrepreneurial. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about opening up the restaurant. I wanted to do that way before as well. I wanted to open up a tutoring school for whatever reason. I thought that I could help kind of teach, and yeah, it felt right, like that, to make the switch. But a lot of people think it's a bit crazy, because like family, mortgage, very lucrative career path, and then now going off on your own. But the kind of two main things that, after a lot of reflection and talking to people, the two things that really helped me was, one is that I realized that I will never have any less responsibility than I do now, right? Because the kids are growing, they're gonna
Mm.
need money for tuition and stuff, and then as I move up the ranks, there's gonna be more and more things to do. And then two is I'm never gonna have any more energy than I do
Mm.
now, because
Right.
for
Yeah.
those folks that usually around the 25 year old mark, then like you have body parts that you didn't know that start hurting, and like different sort of energy levels. Though I've kind of got myself in a groove where I feel actually I'm fitter than I was maybe 5-10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's age is a number, but
Definitely.
definitely it can be an influencing factor. So those two, and the other one is through risk mitigation, in the sense that, well, if I went off and did this thing and it was an utter failure, then I could probably go back and get my own job, right? I mean, the trajectory might be a little bit slower or held back or whatever, but I could probably do that. So there wasn't really as much risk as people thought. The
Mm.
only thing would be a bruise to my ego, in the sense that, oh, this thing failed, right? And you didn't do. And it's like, well, at least I had the experience.
Right.
So it's one of those things where they talk about people often don't regret what they did, they regret what they didn't do, right? So
Absolutely.
I didn't
Yeah.
want to look back on this moment and say, you know what if, right? So
Right.
sure, I may partner into this, but I never ended up doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, I might go back and as a partner with Deloitte, if they invite me to do so. But that's not kind of the aspiration, because the titles and stuff are great. Money is good too, but it's not everything, right? So
Right.
a whole bunch of different decisions. So the process itself was figuring out what was important to me,
Okay.
right? Talking to a lot of people and figuring out, well, what do they think? What are
Mm-hmm.
their perspectives? So I was actually quite collaborative and open and vulnerable in my approach to saying,
Mm.
like, you know what? I have no idea. What the heck should I do, right? In this whole process. Um, and took a whole bunch of insights and not necessarily did what they said, but said, okay, how does that relate to me? And is that something that I could apply in my situation, or are there circumstances slightly different, right?
Right.
So I was lucky to have a lot of mentors to be able to kind of guide me through and ask a lot of good questions and help me kind of uncover different things. And then a lot of reading of books and like the ones that we talked about,
Yeah.
and figuring out, okay, where's my excitement? So I did a process of journaling, of reflective writing. One of the things that I tell folks to do is what I call the 5-2-2-1, which is basically take 5 minutes a day. 2 minutes writing the things that you did today that drained you, like the stuff that's like, oh my gosh, like I if I didn't have to do this ever again, I'd be a happy person, right? Then 2 minutes on what energized you, right? So if you ever got into a state of flow, or the things that helped you become happy and joyful or whatever throughout the day. And then 1 minute thinking about how you can minimize the first and maximize the second, right? And then after weeks, after months, you start noticing patterns, right? And the pattern that I notice is that, well, and I was doing a advisory or an implementation or talking to a CTO, CFO, or a VP of whatever, it was kind of like, meh, okay, great. And when I was having a coffee chat with a new hire on how to be successful in their career, I was like, oh, okay, you want to do this, 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 this. So there was something to that, right? And it wasn't automatic at first. And then the other part was to be comfortable with that, because, well, you shouldn't be happy with kind of helping others in their career. At least the typical kind of corporate world wants you to kind of always move up and sell more clients and do bigger projects and other stuff, versus helping this new hire, right? Like that doesn't seem that important, right? So it's also being comfortable that that's okay, right? And doing that sort of work is something that's helpful. So yeah, long answer to short question, but essentially it was a gradual process. So it was probably a 1-2 year process, and it probably even started before that. But that's when I really focused the efforts, and a lot of conversations, a lot of reflection, a lot of reading went into that. And then actually getting to the point where would I be comfortable with this decision that I was going to make, right? So everyone's going to have different circumstances, but that's the approach that I took, and so far so good, right? There's a lot of things that I would do differently along the way, but that's a different question. So.
That's amazing. Like, I mean, the way you actually broke it down, it does give a lot of insight into your brain, into your thinking. And clearly it is a very introspective. There's a lot of introspection involved. You know, you spoke about, I think one of the key things you spoke about, like as the first step, is to get to understand yourself by and do that reflection, but also talk to people, right? Be in a collaborative approach, and be vulnerable. You use that word, be vulnerable. And I think that's very important. A lot of the youth, a lot of the kids that perhaps even you work with and I work with, they're not that comfortable in sharing and being vulnerable, because there's that sort of like ego. I don't want to show that I'm weak or something of that sort, or whatever is going through their head. And that creates a cover, like an artificial layer on top, which doesn't really allow you to sprout up and go beyond and achieve your potential. So that's really important. And the second piece, I think that anybody who's watching, you should definitely write down and perhaps start practicing, is the journaling piece that Luki spoke about, the 5-2-2-1, correct? Luki, that's the one, right? Like and the benefit of that type of journaling, especially if you go back and look at go back to your journal and see what you have been writing, the beauty of it comes out like you understand your own self better, and you find out your own true strengths and weaknesses, and what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. And using that knowledge is so powerful, because then you can actually make those informed decisions that are more aligned with your true natural inclinations. My second question to you is again a little bit more broader, but hopefully it also gives us an understanding of your thinking. um, I want to revisit the young Luki, right? X number of years ago. I'm not going to say your age over here. Don't worry about that. But X number of years ago, when you were young and you were entering Deloitte as a young consultant or an analyst, and you know, at that point, what was your perspective of what success meant to you at that point, and how has that definition or that perspective of success changed today?
Sure. So to age me, which is fine. I don't care about sharing all that. But I graduated in a time when like the 9/11 just happened a year before. The dot-com bubble burst, and coming
Yeah.
from a computer science background was not great. And SARS was basically on the way. So uh, uh, right now it's kind of all three at the same time. But I mean, it was one where to even have a job, I was thankful for, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of folks that graduated in the same year, they didn't even have the
Yeah.
luxury of a job, right? So I was took a job at a company that I had not really known about, because if you're in tech, you know, like Microsoft and IBM
Yep.
and all those folks like that. Deloitte was an accounting company. I was like, okay, and then I found out this world of consulting. Oh, that sounds interesting, and I got into that. So success at that point was one, getting a job. So yeah, I was successful in that sense. So the bar wasn't that high, but with many folks in my culture and different cultures, it's the climbing up the corporate ladder, right? Getting the titles,
Yes.
doing kind of work for Fortune 500 and big name clients, that sort of thing, um, and doing that. So that was kind of the part of success that was in my world. And in terms of changing today, yeah, so that is one version of success. It's not necessarily my version of success, and my version of success is impact, right? To say
Mm.
how many people would be able to come to me like when I'm later in my life, or um, on my deathbed at my funeral, and say like, Luki, you actually had an impact on my life, right?
Right.
So that's kind of my definition of success there. It's kind of that impact, and also the fact that I'm doing it on my own terms, right? So it's me being able to make the choices and pursuing these different goals, all these different initiatives that I'm starting, and realizing that, well, I can do that, right? I never
Right.
thought I'd write a book, but I did,
Right.
right? I never thought I'd do a podcast. Well, podcasts didn't even exist during that time, but it would be like a radio show or whatever,
Yeah.
like YouTube videos and stuff of that, right? I didn't think I'd be on camera because I was like a shy, introverted kid, right? But I realized that I was holding myself back,
Yeah.
right? And some of these things, it's a who cares if I look foolish there? Like all those kids who
Absolutely.
have kind of imposter syndrome, or the FOMO factor, the fear of
Yeah.
missing out, or whatever, all these different things that people wrestle with, they're real, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're just imagined in their head,
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
So it's a matter of getting through that and realizing that really you're the one holding back your success, because that's how the system was created, right? So like the school system and everything else has been created to kind of help usher you through, but not
Mm.
necessarily get you to your full potential, right?
Right.
And there's all sorts of reasons why. So it's allowing people to understand that success is individual and different, right? So titles are great for some people.
Yeah.
Money is great for some people. They're great motivators.
Yeah.
But it could be impact. It could be experiences. It could be whatever. And then it could change, right? When I was younger, yeah, I wanted more money, right? I wanted like a condo and a fancy car and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. I wanted that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
After I had kids, right? It's like, yeah, I still need a bigger house. I still need all this other stuff, right? The fancy car, not so much, because I didn't want to get it dirty, right? Um, but then realizing like, but to what end? Like, do I need a bigger house and a bigger car and whatever thing? It's just going to be kind of keeping up with the Joneses type of thing,
Yeah.
which realize that the why, right? I would rather have experiences. I would rather travel and experience new things. I would try new foods. I would rather spend my time doing that, or learning and sharing that
Mm.
with other people, right? So figuring out what's important to you, and measuring success for you, not necessarily success for those around you. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're younger and you're not aware of all the things that happen in the world.
Right.
I encourage folks to get off what I call the conveyor belt of life,
Yeah.
which is kind of like go to school, get a degree, get a job, get married, have kids, and get a house in the suburbs or whatever, and then you retire, and then is that it?
Is that it? Exactly.
Is that life, right? So,
Yeah.
and for many people, if that's what you're happy with and comfortable with, awesome.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there kind of wondering or complaining or whatever, like, why not try something else? Life is long. And you have all these different people around you that could probably help, and different resources that could probably help. And especially like where I am, I live in Canada, right?
Yeah.
A very privileged position to be in, right? Versus how many people in developing nations and third world countries that don't even have a hint of the same opportunities or luxuries that I have. So being grateful for all the stuff that I have too, right? So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in there, but yeah, my view of the success was pretty traditional in terms of like money and title and stuff like that, but it's changed and focused more on impact is what I would say it's more focused on, right? Money is nice, but it's one where once I have a roof over my head and food on the table and the kids are taken care of, like that's all I really need, right?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, that's very important. I think, especially for our younger generation, to realize that you know, there's the materialistic aspect of success, the titles, the money, the house, the condos, the cars, and then there's the impact aspect. Like, and it's absolutely fair, regardless of which one you want. There's no right or wrong answer, but having that, what you said earlier, having that self-awareness of what exactly is that you want, that will actually make you happy, which will actually make you feel fulfilled in life, right? And you will get joy out of following that particular path. And having that understanding early on could be very difficult. But again, going back to your previous answer, that those journaling, those reading of those books, reflecting, and being vulnerable, and opening up to your mentors and coaches or close friends, like those actionable items really help you discover who you really are, so that you can have a better definition of your own success. You and I have also spoken about reforming the education space, right? And we both have found our own flaws in the education system. Share with us briefly, if you may, what your vision is of that perfect education system, and why you believe that that system is better than what we have today.
Well, I don't know if I can call it perfect because it'll be constantly evolving,
Absolutely,
but it'll be at least an improvement. And I'm a proponent of kind of Sal Khan's vision. So he started Khan Academy, and more on the premise of mastery learning, right?
Yeah.
So right now the current system pushes you forward based on age, right? His book, he talks about like the Prussian model, and if you are whatever 8 years old, 9 years old, whatever, you progress at the same point.
Right.
But the thing is, like, everybody learns differently, right? And the other challenge is that you move forward if you pass, right? 50%, 70%, whatever it is, but you go through whatever grade 2 math and you get a 70%, even if you get a 90, 95%, right? You move forward to the next one. But imagine doing other things in life like that. So let's pretend building your house, right? Yeah. You build your foundation and it's 95% good, right? And then you build your first floor and it's 95% good. And you build the third floor and it's 95% good, right? And you build this like 10-story, well, it's kind of a 16-story building. Yeah. And each of them are kind of 95% good, which, I mean, if you're 95% in the school system, you're doing well, right? Yeah. Imagine doing it with 50% good or 70% good or whatever. Like, why are we building on these shoddy foundations, absolutely, right? Yeah. And no wonder there's such a collapse kind of in the post-secondary or secondary system. That's kind of the flaw, right? Yeah. My version where, well, I don't know if it's going to be the correct one. There's going to be part of that flipped model, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's not the professor, the teacher talking about stuff, and then you take it home to do it on your own, you watch the stuff and you consume the content on your own, then you leverage the professor and the teacher to ask about questions. So it's going to be some version of that. I'm actually starting a youth success academy, which is going to be follow that premise where right now the pilot sessions, I'm kind of recording the sessions and building the content, but then in future sessions people will just watch that content, and instead of being whatever an hour and a half of me doing whatever, you'll have whatever 10-minute segments, and then you'll have like a half an hour with the class to actually talk about what didn't make sense, how are you going to apply it, how do you relate this topic to that topic, and actually implement it into your life, and then hold each other accountable. So did you do it this week? Did you do it this month? Did you do it next week, next month, right? Those sorts of things. So I don't know yet what this perfect system will be, because the other part is going to be scale, but I feel it's going to be picking things like the Khan Academy type system. Another gentleman that I'm connected with is Danny Forrest, who is a lifelong learner. So him and like Scott Young and Josh Kaufman and stuff, they talk about how learning can be done instead of the 10,000 hour rule that most people know of becoming world class. You can actually learn a lot of things in 20 hours of deliberate practice. And if you look at the learning curve, when you're good enough, it's kind of after those 20 hours, right? Now you have to understand like concepts and facts and stuff, and then proceduralize it. But that's the actual practice of doing it. Probably shouldn't take you 4 years in order to figure that. So oftentimes they do it for things like language learning or a dance or learning how to code and stuff like that. But I'm trying to figure out, well, could you do that for accounting, for finance, for marketing, for chemistry, for physics, for engineering, and all that stuff? Is there a way to kind of do that for those types of kind of traditional school systems, right? So yeah, it would be elements of that. And right now I'm still experimenting. There's obviously going to be technology involved, and it's going to make it personal, right? So it's going to make what you learn different from me, even though we may be the same age or different ages or whatever. It's based on, in consulting, we call it like your maturity, which has less to do about your age versus where you are on the spectrum. And the thing is, curve. You might not want to be a 5, right? It's usually out of 5. You might only want to be a 3, because there are certain things where the focus is less about these certain things, right? And everyone, if you look at like kind of the strengths model or whatever, everyone is good at something. And it's a matter of, in my opinion, doubling down on what you're good at instead of making you kind of a well-rounded person. My view is that becoming a well-rounded person is like the fastest track to mediocrity because you're just kind of average at everything. But if you are really good at something and then tangentially you kind of are good at those other things, then that's usually the person that you want, right? Like you're not going and say, hey, can you give me the most average doctor that you can find, right? No, give me the best doctor in whatever specialization they have, right? So that's kind of the model. It would be kind of that mastery learning piece, putting kind of those foundational skills and changing that flipped classroom plus that 20 hours. They have concept of like skills trees and all that sort of stuff that I'm still piecing together and figuring out. And then it'll be more foundational. So the stuff that I focus on are soft skills. So things like learning to learn, right? Like why aren't they talking about memory techniques, right? The Greeks knew them long before. And we all have good memories. It's just a matter of whether it's a trained memory or an untrained memory. So why wouldn't you teach a grade 12, a grade 6, a grade 1, a kindergarten, how to do these things, how their mind works? And now you'll have to do it differently for kindergarten versus grade 12, but it'll be elements of that, like emotional intelligence, effective communication, right? That sort of thing. Confidence, self-awareness. Let's start with that. And then teach them like 1 + 1, reading, writing, arithmetic, and all that sort of stuff. And that builds on much stronger foundations, right? So yeah, not exactly a exact answer because I don't really have the answer, but it'll be elements of that. So right now I'm kind of piecing them together. And my first foray into that is that Youth Success Academy that I'm creating, and it'll constantly build and evolve. And yeah, we'll we'll see what it is. Come back to me in a year, in 5 years, and I'm sure it'll change by then. But
I'm so excited to hear that, because it's something I myself have been working on it within my own head, trying to piece those things together. You talked about some really interesting stuff like teaching how to build emotional intelligence, social intelligence, how to build, having a growth mindset, those kind of like soft skills, or like what I call them as like your non-cognitive skills, as that learning how to learn as the foundation, and then teach them 1+1 and then arithmetic and all those kind of stuff. That's definitely something that I have the same um, alignment, in a way you can say. I'm aligned with that sort of like a future of what schools and or the education system should look like. And I think when you do have that full framework, Luki, I think that will be a great time for you to come back and share with us what that really looks like. No, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing so many great insights. I learned a lot. I really think I did learn a lot from you, Luki. So thank you so much, and I really hope people who are watching this particular episode, you guys also got you got a chance to understand, Luki's secret of how he's approaching his greatness. Like everyone has that top level tier of how they define success and greatness. You've now got an insight of how Luki's approaching that roadmap, right? So Luki, thank you so much for coming once again. And hopefully you and I, we stay in touch and chat soon.